And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. You may have noticed we have a new intro. I want to give a shout out to my friend and former bandmate, Devin Gowan. Devin has been the one that's made all of the music for the podcast since the creation. So anytime I need something, I always try and look towards him because he's a great musician and a awesome composer. So anyone out there that's listening that might need some work done musically, you can find a way to contact Devin in the show notes. But I just want to say thanks to Devin for all the contributions you've done to help me with this podcast. It's definitely appreciated. Tonight we're going to be joined by my guest, Mike Ricksecker. You may recognize the name. Mike is an author and a paranormal researcher who's also been featured in the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, as well as the UnXplained with William Shatner. He's been on the Travel Channel's The Alaskan Triangle, which one of the books he wrote was called Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. He's also wrote a book called A Walk in the Shadows, deals with the shadow people phenomena, and his most recent book deals with time travel. It's called Travels Through Time, Inside the Fourth Dimension, Time Travel, and Stacked Time Theory. So we're going to get into all that here when Mike joins with us. Before we bring him on, got some front-end stuff that we got to take care of. If you've ever had an experience and you want to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, please send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get you scheduled for a future episode. If you want to help the podcast, the best way to do that is to keep sharing it around. You can leave a 5-star review. That helps with the rankings. Makes it easier for people to find the podcast. When there's new listeners, there's always the potential for new experiences to be shared. So again, keep sharing it around so I can continue to bring you new episodes. There's now a Patreon. It features ad-free episodes from all of our previous episodes. Plus, you get early access to all the new episodes before they're ever released to the public. So if that's something you're interested in, it is $1.99 a month. Just go to the Patreon. The link is in the show notes. I do want to say thank you to everyone out there that's listening, everyone out there that's been sharing it around. You really helped the podcast. It's been growing substantially, and I'm completely honored and humbled by all that. Be sure to follow us on social medias, Facebook, Instagram. It's where I'm most active. You can get on there and talk with me. If you've got experiences you want to talk about on there, you can message me on there as well. But again, I just want to say thank you guys. I appreciate it. And I'm glad to know that you guys enjoy what I'm doing. But I think now we're going to go ahead and bring Mike on. Been looking forward to talking with him. I hope you guys enjoy the episode as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take the time tonight to welcome my guest to the show, Mike Ricksecker. You may have recognized his name from some of the stuff he's been involved in. I know he's been on Ancient Aliens and The Alaskan Triangle, as well as some of the novels he's wrote. Mike, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me tonight, Brandon. I really appreciate it.
And thank you. So, I wouldn't say a funny story, but I got an email from your assistant when she was reaching out to me, and I didn't recognize your name, and then I ended up looking into it, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I recognize that guy. I'd seen you on some of the episodes of those Ancient Alien shows I watch.
Yeah, I've been on a few of those. It's I got one of those crazy last names. It's kind of like alphabet soup. So, you see the name pop up on the screen there watching something like Ancient Aliens or The Unexplained or Alaska Triangle. Your eyes probably just glaze over looking at it. So I understand.
No, I haven't really kept up with the show in a long time. I see the new episodes. I think they come on like Fridays or something. I see them on and I'll watch them, but half the time I don't even know what season they are anymore. They've all kind of started to bleed together.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because the production season, when you're working with the team, their season number that they are working on is actually different than what History Channel labels it as. So it's a little hard to keep up with when somebody says, well, what season should I be watching a particular episode? And it's like, I don't know, because, we filmed it for season 19, but the production company thinks it's season 16. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Like I guess I have no idea how that thing goes about, how many episodes they've got in seasons. I just know that it always seems like it's on TV. If I flip through the channels, it seems like it's on all the time. But I have watched some of the Unexplained. I don't remember ever seeing you on that one, but I do.
One episode so far that's aired, and it was on basically triangle areas of the world. That came out. It premiered about this time last year, and I filmed another one over the summer, which hasn't yet aired.
Okay. How long does it usually take for once you film to when they actually release the episodes?
Kind of really depends. So, like with Ancient Aliens, we filmed throughout the fall, and they start January through the spring, and then they take a break and they start back up during the summer. And then they may do pickups in there. So like the first ever episode that I was on was we filmed it in January. There was something about that particular episode that hadn't gone right. They wanted to reshoot. And so that particular episode that I was on was out in a matter of weeks. But the other ones, were several months, and really kind of depends on the show as well, and in History Channel as far as when they're going to air them. So it could be anywhere from several weeks if they're doing a pickup like that to have to reshoot. But usually you'll be like 3 to 6 months. I had one that took a little over a year. So you never quite know.
Do they have you fly out somewhere just to film it, or they come to you?
Yeah, again, it kind of depends on the show, but generally they fly you out somewhere. For something like Ancient Aliens, it's going to be LA or New York. They have crews in both cities. Other shows, I filmed up in Buffalo. My home is in Cleveland, so I just drove up there. It was a Canadian production crew, and they came over from Toronto into Buffalo to record the American cast. And so I just drove up there for that one.
Yeah, I've always kind of wondered how that operates. Like, if they have to pay for everyone to fly out there, if you have to travel on your own, or how that works. But
yeah, they'll fly you out there. It's a real class act. They take care of the lodging, they take care of the flight, they take care of the Uber and all of that sort of stuff. They give you a whole sheet of the call times and basically how your entire day is going to work. They do a really good job with that.
Yeah. Now, the books you've been writing, like your recent book is called Travels Through Time Inside the Fourth Dimension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it travels through time inside the fourth dimension, time travel and stacked time theory. That's my latest, my 13th book, actually. And this really dives into, I'll just say this. It's the first book of the Connecting the Universe series. And I wanted to start with, a really good base. Time travel has always been an interest of mine in looking into those types of mysteries. So, we're starting from the inner workings of the cosmos, how time works, how the dimensions work, all that sort of stuff, and what real time travel may actually look like. And then I'm going to break it off from there. We're going to get into like, energetic hotspots around the world. We're going to get into ancient Egypt, Stargates, Atlantis. Those are all going to be future books. So one of these books, when we get into Earth energy, is going to have some pieces from my previous book, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. I mean, that one's specifically on that particular triangle area of the world. But so most of my books delve into the supernatural, the unexplained, looking at esoteric knowledge and, what a lot of these, mysterious phenomena around the world may actually be.
Now, you mentioned like with supernatural and unexplained. I think you wrote something before about shadow men too, didn't you?
Yeah, Walk in the Shadows, A Complete Guide to Shadow People. That's a deep dive into that particular world. Stems from experiences that I had when I was younger. And then as I got older and got into the research and started doing paranormal investigations, had additional experiences. I talked to others in the field who had experiences. I started giving presentations on a variety of different subjects, but including the shadows as well. And so I just over the years started collecting all of this data, all these stories that people were reporting to me, as well as my own experiences and things that we had seen on paranormal investigations. And it just ended up culminating in this book, kind of getting into the different types, getting into what these things may actually be. Are they interdimensional beings? Are they human spirits that can't fully manifest as an apparition? Are they extraterrestrials? And really, depending on the particular shadow, they could be any of these. So again, we start getting into the idea of different dimensions.
It's kind of where I've went with my own line of thinking is a lot of things that we think are paranormal. I've wondered if it's not something from a different dimension, like an alternate reality that kind of bleeds into our realm, if that makes any sense. Like the things that people are seeing, they're a shadow to us, but that's because they're at a higher dimension. We can't fully see what they are.
Exactly. Yeah. Our eyes only see into a narrow band of the spectrum. You look at your household pets, they see and hear things better than we do. So humans are very limited in that type of capability. And, our theoretical physics shows, at least to the best of our knowledge at this point, that there are up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions, starting from 0 all the way up to 10. We are in the 4th dimension, which we call time. That's where our consciousness resides. And we have access and can freely interact with all the ones below us. The 3rd dimension, 3-dimensional objects. So like this, glass of water sitting in front of me, or the computer mouse, that sort of thing. We have access to that. And what's fascinating is our consciousness, which is in the 4th dimension, is actually residing in a 3-dimensional object, our body. So that means we're actually multidimensional beings. But everything else above that is elusive to us. It's like, we know they exist. The math checks out that they exist, but how do we actually get there and access that? Excuse me. And that's what has remained elusive to us. But if we were to get to those other dimensions, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth, they're above time. They would see time as an object, much like we see the 3-dimensional objects that are around us. And this is how we may be able to move through time, or this may be how we're seeing some of these different things play out, like what we might call a haunting may actually be a time slip. And I get into, in this latest book, stacked time theory, which is really taking the idea that time, the dimension of time, can be an object. It's all there. It's all concurrent. And every moment, take like where you're sitting right now, every moment that has happened, is happening, and will happen, are all stacked on top of each other. Each moment like a photograph in a stack of photos. And sometimes 2 of those moments will resonate at the same frequency, and they'll bleed over into each other. You'll get a glimpse of perhaps you'll see a woman in a Victorian dress or something like that. But then she'll turn and look at you as if you're the ghost, that she's seen an apparition or a shadow or something of this nature. So those are two moments in time bleeding into each other. And really, it's a type of interdimensional phenomena.
I've been interviewing people that have had like all sorts of these experiences, and they've seen what they think might be aliens. They've also seen things like cryptids or whatever. And like when you get into some of the stories that these people are saying, it's interesting to me that, especially when it comes to like stuff like Bigfoot or something like that, where they claim these things, you see tracks and they just disappear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they've chased them and they just vanish. It's weird to me to try and comprehend, like, if this is supposed to be a real thing, like a flesh and blood creature, how would it be able just to disappear? And a lot of people lately have been talking about these type of things are not necessarily from our world. They're from a higher dimension, and somehow they're bleeding into ours. I try and understand a lot of but I'm not a scientist or anything like that. So my little brain is trying to process all this stuff. And it's like, well, scratch my head a few times. Like, I don't know if that's possible, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah. It gets you asking the question, which I think is really important in this field. It's some of these things we're not going to have answers for in our lifetime, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't research, that we should just, cast it off to the side. Let's keep asking the questions. Let's keep investigating what information that we're able to obtain during our lifetime, pass it on to the next generation. Hopefully, somebody will pick up that mantle. But it's interesting with some of these cryptids, how they disappear like that. And, I understand both sides of the argument. You have some people that are saying, well, no, they're actually, physical beings that live here on Earth. You're in their environment. They know all the hiding places. They know where to camp out, that sort of stuff. And well, yeah, I mean, I get that, because we see that with, our standard animals out in the wild already. They run off and, they know where to hide. So I understand that argument. But I also understand the other side of it, that, they could actually be something interdimensional, because it's been so elusive to find, okay, where are the remains of these things,
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. So, can they slip in and out of another dimension? Well, we see, or let's speculate, in any case, of other beings that slip in and out of other dimensions, whether it's, like the shadows that we were talking about before, or some of these beings that we consider to be extraterrestrials may actually be some sort of interdimensional being. Even going back into our historical legends and lore, when we look at stories of like the fairies, those stories there have so many similarities to our modern day UFO abduction cases, that it's like, okay, there's a relationship here. Are we really talking about the same thing, but we just have a different context of it because we're now a more modern society? The possibilities there.
Yeah, I've talked with people before that think that the old the Fae were actually just another way of being interdimensional beings that kind of bleed in with us too.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at those stories, okay, people are being taken into the fairy realm, and time works differently. They believe they've been gone 5 minutes, and it's actually been a day. And when they emerge back, they're shocked at the amount of time that has elapsed. And some of these stories still even exist today. I include one of these stories in my book, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, in which it was in the Anchorage Daily News up there in Alaska, where these hunters had come across this boy. They had been in this one particular area near Pilcher Mountain, and all of a sudden he just showed up out of nowhere, just basically materialized, and there's no tracks around him at all. Leading, because there was snow on the ground, and they were wondering, okay, where did this kid come from? How do you get to this spot where he's at? There's no tracks. And he told this fascinating story about how essentially he had been kidnapped by these small beings, the urchin hut. And and he said they took him inside the mountain. And there inside the mountain, he met this other girl who had been there for something like 40 years, but she was still a little girl. So time wasn't moving at all for her. They eventually released him. And again, these were, short, tiny beings that 150 years ago, we'd be talking about it being some sort of fairy story. This being is within the legends and lore of the indigenous tribes there in Alaska, but it's still, again, very, very similar in nature to these other abduction stories, something that we might even consider, an extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm. When I hear small beings or whatever, it kind of reminds me of like puckwudgies. And I think those were also, I know they're up from the more of the East Coast area, but even here in Indiana, we have stories of little people down at one of the state parks not too far from here. That there's been sightings of what they call little people. And there's an old battleground reenactment place. And they call them, when I was in high school, they used to call it Hobbit Land, because a lot of people used to see small little humanoids running around out there. So, of course, I went out there as a kid, and I was like, I never seen anything. But I don't know. That's the little people things always kind of interest me, because even as a kid, like, I've always been somewhat skeptical of things, but I wanted to believe, I wanted to see.
Right.
But like I said, all this type of stuff's always fascinated me. So, but now the stories of the little people and stuff like that with the Fae, I've always often wondered if you don't have fairy tale. I know, like, in the term fairy tale obviously derives from that, but what caused them to start these stories? There had to have been something that inspired them to tell these stories,
Right. Yeah. Something happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's, in any of these legends and tales, there's always some sort of grain of truth. Now, over the years and over time, some of them have been embellished and added to. You have to kind of consider the source sometimes, but there's always a grain of truth as far as what happened here. And to me, though, there's a bit of a difference when it comes to the indigenous tribes, because those elders and those shamans from those tribes are very, very insistent that their stories are accurate. And the reason why they insist that is because most of those tribes didn't have a written language. They didn't, write things in books and pass things down. Everything was within their storytelling, and not just, mythology, but within their stories were lessons on how to survive and how to live. And that's how they passed down their knowledge. So they tried to make sure that when they related their stories, that, the oral tradition, that it was very, very accurate. Because again, they didn't have that written language. So, those that speak against the idea of oral tradition and passing things down in that nature always give the example of when we were kids in school playing operator. And the teacher would start on one side of the classroom and whisper a sentence into a student's ear. And by the time it got all the way around the room, it was something completely different. But you have to consider that you're talking about kids. I remember doing that in first grade, 6 years old, and, everybody's kind of laughing and giggling. So, it might start with, Jane drives a blue car. By the time it gets to me, it's, George eats a slimy hot dog or something, because kids are silly and goofy. So of course it's going to be different by the time it gets to the other end. But indigenous shamans and elders were very, very particular as far as the knowledge they passed down, because it was very important for the survival of their community.
I always feel like with indigenous people, a lot of people write off their old legends and everything, but again, it's kind of like what I just said a little bit ago. Something had to inspire that. And a lot of them are so like skinwalkers for like with the Navajos. They won't even talk about something like that just because it's so taboo for them that they don't even want to mention it, even in modern times. Like to them, that's still a real thing. And I'm not saying it's not because I have no idea, but it's so ingrained into their culture that a lot of these things they talk about is real to them. Now, is it real to everyone else? I don't know, but they truly believe in their old legends and all their old myths and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And something's happening out there because the cattle mutilation phenomena is real.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something is happening there where those type of mutilations that occur make no sense whatsoever. I mean, you're talking like surgical precision on a lot of these cuts. You're talking that, animals that look like they were picked up 50 feet in the air and just drop straight down. Yeah, I mean, some of these things just make zero sense whatsoever. So, are what we're experiencing with these cattle mutilations today, what happened or what they observed 100, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, that ended up becoming the Skinwalker Tales. It's possible.
Yeah, I never really thought about it that way. That is possible. Just because with the mutilations and everything, I've tried to look into that. I'm not a researcher. I won't ever say I am. I read stuff like from internet or a little bit of book or here and there, but like the cattle mutilations to me, like, and it's been going on for years. And like you said, with the surgical precision and everything, it isn't just someone out there doing it. It has to be someone educated because a lot of the time there's not even any blood anywhere.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Blood's been completely drained and there's not a drop on the ground. How do you explain that?
Yeah. If it was a predator, you'd see tears. You'd see where it's been eating it, everything. Like you wouldn't just surgically remove a piece and then there's no blood, there's nothing, and everything's cut with like almost like a cauterized to it. So it's definitely not predators or anything like that. So it has to be something with a higher intelligence doing it. But a lot of people are thinking they're hoaxed. Again, how are you hoaxing that? Like, why are you hoaxing that? What good is it doing?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes no sense whatsoever to hoax something like that for some sort of attention or fame. Some of these people that are reporting this phenomena are like 80 years old. There's nothing for them to gain at that point. They're not going on a speaking tour at that point, so there's nothing for them to gain in trying to hoax something like that. So, and again, you're talking surgical precision and somebody that's 80 years old, their hand's going to waver, it's not going to be pretty. So,
I think that also ties back into with the crop circles, and everyone said they've shown ways of how they made the crop circles. These guys came out with the boards on their feet. So now every crop circle someone sees, oh, it's fake. It's fake. I don't think every single one of them originally were fake, but just because one person said so, now everyone's automatically writes them all off.
Yeah, and that's what happens is one person will ruin it for everybody else. It casts that seed of doubt. I mean, already when you see something astonishing like that, your mind is trying to process, how did this happen? This is abnormal. I don't understand. And it's almost like your mind will try to fight against it. And once somebody provides the, here's the explanation, this person over here faked it, you're like, oh, okay. And then that becomes it all, unfortunately. And there have been people that have faked crop circles, unfortunately. But some of them, when you do that board pressing, there's a way that the shafts of, if you're talking wheat or what have you, there's a way that the shafts are crushed. But you look at some of these other circles and they're so very precise, but yet they're not crushed at all that the way a board would do it. So there's a interesting idea out there, an interesting hypothesis that's been postulated about Earth energy possibly doing this, that frequency waves coming up out of the Earth. And we see this in like cymatics, which is basically the sound waves in the grains of sand, and they make different patterns and things like this. So one of the ideas is that something is kicking off some sort of energy wave out of the ground that is creating these. And I think that's a interesting idea. I'd like to see somebody make that happen, just to kind of show, okay, this can happen with this type of crop circle.
Yeah, I haven't really noticed anything lately about crop circles. You don't really see or hear much, at least I haven't, when it comes to any new ones or anything popping up. It seems like that whole thing just kind of disappeared. I think there's still some obviously happening, but for whatever reason, you don't ever really see much about them.
Yeah, they happen, but because they have such a negative stigma for hoaxes, that nobody really touches it anymore.
You would think.
So I would recommend it. Freddie Silva has a good book on crop circles. I forget the exact name of it. It came out probably like 10 years ago or something like that, but he's done some good work on that.
Have you ever heard of the red grid mark phenomena?
Red grid mark. Explain it to me. I don't think I have.
I have a couple episodes. One's not out yet, but these people are getting these red marks on their bodies. Like it's under the skin. It's under like the couple layers of skin. There's no itch. There's no pain. There's no burn or anything like that. And some of them are in intricate patterns. Now, obviously, some people have figured out that if they're sitting on a bench or something, that puts that impression on them, but these were there for several days. And there's been a lot of questions about it. I know there's 30 something pages, I think, on the Mayo Clinic website of people asking about this. I have 73 pages from a survey that was conducted about it. There is no explanation as to how these things are done, but there seems to be a intelligence behind them of how they're being placed on people, because they're on top of their heads. There's been some on the bottom of the chin. A lot of them's on people's backs. So a lot of the time, no one even knows they have these patterns on themselves. And for whatever reason, it's not very well known, which is strange. I know one other person that's talked about it on a podcast, but like my podcast and their podcast is like the only ones that have ever really done an episode that I'm aware of. And there's a lot of people that experience this. I had someone reach out to me this past summer because their wife had it, and they only knew to reach out to me because they saw I had an episode. They started researching it and they saw an episode, so they contacted me. I was like, I don't know anything about this stuff. I interviewed someone that's done the research into it, and they're still continuing to research it, but for some reason it's like so unknown that most like mainstream science is not even looking towards it, just because they don't know what it is. I know people have went to the doctors, they went to dermatologists, and there's no explanation as to what this is and what causes it, but then it goes away. But most people that have it end up having lucid dreams while they're having this on their body.
Yeah, that's a new one on me, but we see other strange phenomena occur. We talk about implants, possibly put into human bodies by extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings, or something of that nature. And so it almost sounds like something along those lines, but with its own little flair to it. I'll have to look into that one a bit more. Thank you for letting me know about that.
Yeah, I'm slowly trying to bring more awareness to it. I'm next year, I said I have a new interview coming out here in the next couple weeks. I think your interview will actually air first before that one does, but this will air in a couple weeks. And then next year, I'm planning on doing a more dive into it with someone else to try and bring more exposure to it, just because out of all the topics that I've done, this one is the most, you can see that it's true because there's a Facebook group, but all these people keep posting these pictures, like new people keep joining this group that I'm a part of, and they keep showing like these random red splotches on themselves, and they're in patterns, and like they're not 100% perfect patterns either. So it's almost like if it was done by like a machine, you'd think it would be perfect. Right. So there's like some slight like the person may have moved, so it's not like a complete pattern to themselves. Now, some of them you could write off as, again, like I said, they may be pressed up against something. Maybe someone's just doing it for whatever reason. But then I've seen some where they're little kids and they're only like a couple of years old and they have them on their forehead. It's like, I can't see a parent pressing something onto their kid's forehead to cause that kind of a marking.
Yeah. No, that would be bizarre.
So, no, I definitely recommend looking it up just because I don't think there's enough eyes looking into it. I know this is one of the things that you're interested in, so I thought maybe you've heard of it before, and if not, maybe you could look into it as well.
Yeah, I'll check it out for sure. Yeah, I'll dive into that one a little bit.
But yeah, I'm looking through some of the things that you've looked into and researched, but I've been more curious about what actually made you want to go down this pathway anyways. Like, what were something that you experienced that kind of set you down this path?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of different things. So I'm an experiencer. I think that's how a lot of people get into it. You know, some people just have a genuine curiosity, but a lot of people have had experiences and are trying to find answers as to what exactly happened. So, yeah, my first significant paranormal experience, because I had a couple others beforehand that, you know, I was so young at the time, it's hard to make sense of. But the first real significant one was I was about 8 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night and there's a tall, dark shadow in the corner of my room. Today, I saw something like that and be like, okay, that's a shadow person. But, you know, I had no idea about those sorts of things at 8 years old. I'm just thinking that somebody's broken into the house. It's an intruder. They're there to rob the place, maybe kill me. That's where your mind goes at that age. Fortunately, I'm still alive to tell the tale, which is great. But it did get physical with me. It approached my bed and leaned over, and I'm staring into this blank black face. There's nothing there. There's no eyes, no nose, no mouth, nothing. I'm trying to scream. My mouth opened up, but I was too terrified, you know, being how young that I was. And it grabbed me by the wrists, crossed my arms across my body, and then ran off down the hall. At that point, I found my voice, found my legs, ran off screaming in my parents' bedroom. And, you know, they're trying to calm me down and console me, trying to tell me I just had a bad dream, but I knew I hadn't had a bad dream. I was awake for this whole thing. We lived in that house for 10 years, and, you know, I would never say that was a haunted house. It was, it was kind of a one-off, and nothing else really significant happened there. So, moved from that house when I was 13 to we were living in Massachusetts at that time. We moved to a new house in Ohio, and as I'm unpacking boxes and putting things away, I kept seeing this figure in my doorway. And I turned and looked, and off would go down the hall toward my parents' bedroom. And, you know, this happened over and over again. I'd be unpacking boxes, putting things away, and somebody would be standing there in the doorway, turn and look, and off would go. What the heck's going on here? That lasted for, well, it was going on for a few days, numerous times. I finally decided to ask my mother about it. And I was just like, well, you know, I keep seeing this figure standing in my doorway. And, you know, it was different. And I didn't tell her this part, but in my mind, I'm just like, you know, this is different than what I saw before when I was younger. What I saw before when I was younger is very, very solid. Of course, it was physical, you know, came right up to me. This one is like more translucent. It's very fast, does not want to come up to me at all, keeps running away. So I told her what I had seen. She actually admitted she had seen this thing too. But, you know, she didn't seem alarmed about it at all. She just kind of recognized, yeah, something's here. So I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. You know, I'm not crazy for one. That's great. Because mom says she's also seen it, but she's also not alarmed. So, okay, if mom's not worried about this thing, then I'll get playful with it. So I started calling him Tom, like Peeping Tom. You know, just because he'd peep in the doorway, and you know, when I'd see him, like, hi Tom, and you know, off he'd go, kind of the same thing. And you know, that activity lasted for a few months, and then kind of went away. So I just chalked it up to somebody that was there at the house, was checking out the new family that was moving in, deemed that we were okay, and went about its business. So from there, fast forward about a year and a half, and now adjusted into my new school, have friends and all that sort of stuff. My friend David and I were at our friend Lori's house in the historic downtown area of this town that we lived in. And we're just, shooting the breeze in her living room, teen drama sort of stuff. But then she got into the subject of her house, and she's like, I think my house is haunted. And David and I perk up and we're like, oh, okay, this is interesting. What's going on here? So she starts to tell us some stories, and there's an old historic family cemetery in the backyard, and talking about different things moving around the house. And her main concern was in her bedroom. Every time that she would tack something up on the one wall in the bedroom, it would always fall down. We're talking like posters and things like that. We're in high school. And, it'd be like an hour, a day, a week later, or whatever. The thing would always fall down, whatever she was trying to put up. So, okay, we're going to go check it out. We're going to go investigate. So we go up there, and we're taking a look around the room, looking at the wall. Lori keeps telling us some more stories. And then all of a sudden, David put his hand flat right on the wall. And all of a sudden, he turned this bright red and started sweating profusely. And I'm looking at David like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this before. What in the world's going on with my friend? I was astonished. So he starts going wall to wall in the house to find the other quote unquote hot spots. And that was the moment that I knew. I'd already had these other experiences, but that was the moment that I knew that I was totally fascinated by whatever this was. And I was going to be involved some way, shape, or form, researching and investigating this stuff for the rest of my life.
Have you had any experiences since you've been, obviously since you're older and everything? Have you had anything recently?
Yeah, I spent a number of years as an active paranormal investigator, and a lot of experiences out on some of those different investigations. And I've had other experiences over the years, outside of those investigations. Stuff that even okay, when I was in the Air Force, stationed in Alaska. We're in the basement of the Alaska Command Building. That's where our offices were, the communication center, all that sort of stuff. And many of us kept seeing these shadows moving about down there. So this wasn't just me. This was a lot of people who kept seeing these things, and you couldn't really talk about it. You couldn't get vocal about it because if you took that up the chain too far, you would be sent down to mental health and you'd lose your security clearance. And you didn't want that to happen. So, it was mostly us airmen talking about it. There's some staff sergeants, technical sergeants, master sergeants. But I think the master sergeants down there, which would have been the NCOICs, that's about as far as it went, was with them. But, you'd be like walking down, one of the halls between the cubicles, and all of a sudden you see something dart by and you turn to your buddy, you see that? Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah. So this is something that, things that I've seen and experienced for, quite a while.
I haven't had anything I would write off to be 100% paranormal. With me trying to be a skeptic and everything, I always try and look for the rational explanation first. And I've had some weird experiences that are out there or whatever. But when it comes to actually seeing the shadow people or hauntings or anything like that, I'm not 100% sure that stuff that I've experienced is that way. Again, like I said, I try and look for the logical explanation. So maybe my skepticism is part of the reason why I don't experience much, because I tend not to pay much attention into it. But I mentioned this recently, and I noticed one of the things on here is the doppelganger effect. I've had someone recently, they didn't want to talk about it, but they came into their house and they had a conversation with someone is either their daughter or they're talking to a parent or something like that. And then they went into the other room and the person came in from outside and they're like, they just had a conversation with them. They're like, I've been outside. And I was like,
Yeah.
how is that possible? And then just recently, and I brought this up on another episode. I went into the kitchen and I was walking through to go to the bathroom, and my daughter was at the table doing her homework, and I heard her voice say, "Hey, Dad." So I'm like, stop. I'm like, what? She looks up at me. She just say, "Hey, Dad." No. And like rolls her preteen eyes at me. I'm like, we don't. I was like, I swear you just said something. I was like, okay. And I just went on about my business, but I know I heard her voice.
Yeah.
So again, I don't say it's paranormal, but at the same time, it's like, what is that? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. There's a phenomenon that is happening. I wouldn't necessarily call it paranormal. So, and as an investigator, when you're out there, place that's supposed to be haunted, when you see and experience something, you don't automatically go to, oh, it's a ghost. No. You try to find the rational explanation first, and you try, is this it? Is that it? And once you rule out all of the different rational possibilities it could be, well, you might have something then, but you have to go through that process of elimination first. When it comes to this type of phenomenon with doppelgangers, they're not the you have you get to old legends and lore. Well, it's the evil twin. Well, no, I don't partake in the idea of it being an evil twin or some sort of nefarious entity that's trying to mimic you and all that sort of thing. I think what most people are experiencing is some form of a time slip, that what they're seeing and experiencing is that person, but it's not, it's displaced from its point in time. So a couple of stories that I like to tell about this. And they're in the book. So the famous poet Goethe, German poet, and he wrote about this in his prolific work, Dichtung und Wahrheit, or Poetry and Truth. And he tells this fascinating story of he's walking down this road toward Jotunheim. And he's having an affair with a young woman there. He's kind of lost in his thoughts about the whole situation as he's walking down the road. Today we'd say, we're zoning out. And kind of that state where you're driving down the road and you miss your exit because you're lost in your thoughts and you're zoning out. And he sees off on the other side of the road at this one point, this man dressed in this gold trimmed gray suit, and he turns to get a better look at the guy, and all of a sudden the gentleman disappears. He's like, what the heck was that? So he notes it, of course. There's nothing he can do about it. The guy totally disappeared. He continues on his way. Well, years later, he's walking down that same road, but in the opposite direction. And it gets around that location where he had that particular incident, and looks down at himself and realizes, oh my gosh, I was the man in the gold trimmed gray suit. I saw myself. I'm actually wearing the suit right now. He didn't set himself up like that. He just all of a sudden realized that as he re-entered that area. So this was an incident in which he had seen himself at a different point in time. Another interesting one, and this actually takes us back into the shadow phenomenon, another explanation for what this could possibly be. So, young man related a story, actually not to me, actually to Jim Harold, but and Jim is another, he has a number of shows and does this type of research, and related to me because, of course, my interest in the shadow phenomenon. And this young man, when he was a child, he had walked into the kitchen one day and saw there standing over by the kitchen table this tall, dark, hooded figure. Scared him to death. Zoom, he runs right out. And so, for years, this becomes a hooded shadow person story, very dark, ominous sort of thing. Well, he grows up. He's older now. He's a young man. And he's in the kitchen one day at the table making himself a sandwich. He's wearing a hoodie. And all of a sudden, he notices coming in the doorway this shorter shadow person who stops and then zoom takes off right back out of the kitchen. And in that moment, he realizes, oh my gosh, I just saw myself the whole time. I just saw myself when I was younger and when I was a little kid. I actually saw myself when I was older. So it's two moments in time bleeding over into each other, and where you can have, this type of brief interaction like that. So I think a lot of these, what we would call doppelganger incidents are actually time slips.
You're just seeing yourself from a different portion of time. It just bleeds back into our time frame.
Seeing yourself or another person.
Mm-hmm.
Because that happens too. Like you said, the conversations, and I had this woman from Turkey contact me about this, where she had walked into the house one day, and her husband was totally flabbergasted because he was like, he's on the phone with his buddy, and he's like, you just walked in here like 5 minutes ago and went upstairs. You said you were going to take a shower. And, his buddy on the other end of the phone is like, well, yeah, because he heard the whole interaction. And, it's those type of incidents. The Norse mythology, I had a term for that. They called them vartigers, but this was an image of a person that would like precede themselves. And again, because they were superstitious at the time, they attached this legend and lore and that sort of thing to them. But yeah, it really is just a slip in time.
Now, when people have deja vu or something like that, is that sort of the same thing to an extent? Because I get deja vu a lot. It kind of creeps me out.
Yeah, deja vu. And there's a couple different things could be happening here. So many people experience premonitions or have a dream of, something that is going to happen. They don't necessarily know it at the time until it happens, right? That, that all of a sudden you're going to, you might have a dream of, some building, some room you've never been in, some, maybe people you've never met before, and you have a distinct interaction, and then month, week, whatever, several months later, the next day it seems to be sporadic, but all of a sudden it happens. And oh my gosh, I just had a dream about this very thing. I think some of the some deja vu incidents are bits and pieces of dreams that we've had of being in a particular situation. And when a lot of times when we wake up from our dreams, we don't remember all the details, and you might turn to your spouse, I just had this crazy dream, and you can only get about 3 points of the dream out of your mouth because all the other things that happen just kind of fade.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that some of these deja vu moments that we're having are actually bits and pieces of premonitory dreams that we've had. Other types of deja vu, I believe, going back to the idea of stacked time theory, that again, every moment that has happened, is happening, and will happen, all stacked on top of each other, like a stack of photographs at a particular location. Well, if you believe in reincarnation, that you come back to this earth, this plane of existence, this dimension after you pass away and begin a new life, then that would mean if all time is concurrent, that all of those lives would therefore be coexisting at the same time. Well, if that's the case, then some of these deja vu moments could be two of your lives actually habitating or being in the same room, at the same time, and you're just kind of, recognizing that, oh, this is familiar because you have multiple lives that are at that particular location. There's a third one that I'll throw out there, and this may be a little more rational for some people, a little more scientific. When we look at like DNA and passing down of genes, inherited traits, things like that, there are genetic markers that we inherit from our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors, all those sorts of things. And there's been some interesting tests that have been done on other organisms like glowworms and things like this, that some of these different animals, some of these different organisms can pass down a trait, or what we might call a memory, up to like 14 generations. So it's possible that, as long as an incident or as long as a memory occurred before whoever it was in your line was begat, that there could be a genetic marker placed within your DNA that when you show up at a location like, a historic building, maybe it was a castle in Ireland or whatever, and you have that, this seems really familiar. It could be, you're thinking, is this almost like a deja vu? It actually could be a genetic marker that's been handed down through your ancestry, that, maybe one of your ancestors was there, had a very, very distinct memory that created a genetic marker within the DNA that was then passed down.
Yeah, I've heard of stuff like that before. Like you have memories passed down through your DNA, because basically it's almost like a memory is being transferred just from your genetic code. And I don't know how that's possible, but again, I'm not going to say I understand one way or the other, but I know
it's really fascinating when you start seeing things like, there's a child that's exhibiting behaviors just like, little hand gestures, like the way they, cup their chin, or, rest their cheek on their fist, or, whatever, those little things like that, I was like, well, your great Aunt Trudy used to do something like that, and you never met great Aunt Trudy, but yet you're performing the same mannerisms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I've heard things too, like even with people's genetic makeup, I understand like some kids might look more like a different relative. My son, I think, looks like his third cousin. It'd be strange to say how that's possible. Obviously, they're a little bit related, but they look very similar, and obviously they have some of the same DNA. But you would think they'd be like, if you looked at his pictures and you looked at my son's pictures when they're the same age, you'd think they were like brothers.
Yeah,
it is strange how even without being that closely related, they can still share some of the same genetic makeup to make them where they look very similar. But
yeah, it's genetics is really amazing. My mother had shown me this picture years ago, and I'm familiar with the photo now, but she had shown this to me, and I'm looking at it, and it looked like my middle son Chase. And I'm like, this is Chase, but I can't place this photo at all. He was never in this situation. He was never dressed in that suit, and where in the world I don't understand what this photo is. And she kind of laughed, and she's like, that's your father. And I was just thunderstruck. It was his first communion photo. So, oh yeah, I was just, okay, wow, that is insane how much that, my son Chase looked like my father at that age. Oh, wow. So whenever we get together, we just kind of laugh. It's like, I'll tell Chase, all right, get a good look at me, get a good look at your grandfather. This is the way you're going to look at these stages in your life.
I used to look just like my dad, and if you look at my senior picture with my grandfather, seen your picture. Him and I look so much alike.
Mm-hmm.
So it is strange just how the genetics work. But
Yeah, it's pretty uncanny.
there was one other thing I kind of wanted to circle around when it comes to what your book with time travel and everything else. Do you think that some of the things that we've experienced is related to time travel now? Just because I know there's something out there like the Mandela effect and some things that people feel like are changed here and there. And I know a lot of people want to say the Mandela effect's because CERN or something that they've done, or people are coming back from changing things from within time. Is that a possibility you kind of believe in, or is that just something completely different?
Well, yeah, to a degree. I don't jump on the conspiracy theory about CERN, but are there future generations? I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be human. You get a extraterrestrials, or even another life form that has evolved on Earth millions of years from now, that has developed time travel technology, that has come back and done something to stir up the timeline. I think it's certainly possible. The idea of changing brand, and nobody's going to come back, and it's so trivial. Nobody's coming back to change the way Fruit Loops is spelled or how Oscar Mayer is spelled. I mean, that's trivial sort of stuff. Now, some of these things, have they, because, just by somebody showing up somewhere in a timeline, they don't even necessarily have to purposefully change anything. Just by the nature of like the butterfly effect. One little thing could be out of place. They could, an observer, they could just be there to watch and observe, and they could walk across a street somewhere, and maybe a car slows down enough to let them cross the street. That totally changes up a variety of different things that creates ripples throughout the timeline, so that some of these things that we remember differently, occur, and that change happens. So, I do believe that sort of thing can happen via time travelers. But I think we need to be careful. I mean, some of them are just, they're fun. They're really fun sometimes, because you're like, I had this memory. But some of these are certainly legitimate as well.
I know
some of them are obscure.
Yeah, some of the things when it comes to this with the Mandela effect, I specifically remember certain things, and obviously now they're claiming that's not true, like the cornucopia on the Fruit of the Looms.
Yeah, that's one I remember too. Yeah,
I swear that was there, and apparently it wasn't. And the monocle on the Monopoly thing, the little eyepiece, I remember that too, but apparently he didn't have that either.
Yeah, and I mean, I can understand people saying that's getting mixed up with, Mr. Peanut. Okay. But yeah, the cornucopia is one I certainly remember. But there's one, I included an example of it in my book. I do have a section of one of the chapters on the Mandela effect. The one that, and I'll leave this for your listeners so they'll go get the book and check it out. But the one that I specifically talk about, if you do a Google search on the Mandela effect, you'll find lists of top 20, top 50, top 100. You won't find this on any of the lists, but it is absolutely legitimate as far as what myself, my mother, people all over the world have experienced. I found something that my mother and I were trying to research out a few years ago. And basically it still had to do with pop culture. We were trying to, figure out a specific movie, and we could not find it to save our lives, and finally found this board in which all these different people were talking about this, that they also remembered it the same way that we did. You won't find it in any of those major lists, but it is one that did legitimately happen. It has legitimately changed.
The weird one to me, because I was a kid when this, I remember seeing the whole Sinbad thing, where he supposedly was this genie. And I remember watching cartoons because certain, whatever channel it was, I always watched afternoon cartoons. And I remember seeing a preview for it. And I didn't know who Sinbad was or anything like that. I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I do remember the commercial, like promoting this movie, him walking down some street with some other guy, and it was like dark outside. And he was supposed to be a genie. He was wearing like gold, bright, flashy pants or whatever else. And I never thought anything about it. And then I literally only remembered it because this Mandela effect claiming it didn't exist. I was like, wait a minute. I remember seeing something about that. And it's like, I never saw the movie, but I remember at least seeing a commercial about the movie. So it's strange. I can't explain it.
It's something happened in the timeline. Something was affected. And again, it's not that somebody went back in time to make sure, Sinbad's movie didn't come out. It's going to be one of those that, something was changed enough in the timeline that you're never really going to know what it was. But okay, was it that, the script writer took a different direction in his life because some other opportunity popped up, or maybe he got hit by a bus. You never know. Or did somebody come along and make a better movie offer to Sinbad, and he did this other thing instead because of whatever was changed further back in the timeline. You could come up with any number of different possibilities as to what may have happened. Again, going through the whole butterfly effect, this thing happened and that thing happened and that thing happened along the way, and this got changed. So, but yeah, with the ability to move in and out of time, which I absolutely believe you can, even some of these time slips that we've been talking about, those are 2 moments in time bleeding over into each other. So, if my moment here bleeds into another one that happened in the house that I'm sitting in right now, say 30 years ago, well, my interaction with that person is going to have some sort of influence on them. Now, will that little bit of influence there cause them to change something in their life that would have otherwise played out differently? It's possible.
I've always thought about it in the almost like the grandfather paradox, to where even if someone were to come back in time, they didn't try and mess with anything, like you said, the butterfly effect. One thing different can offset different things that can bleed into changing timelines, just because you go back in time. Just say you stepped on a bug. Well, that bug did something else, and like it led into it's changing something. Like, I don't think people see it that way, but I've always kind of wondered that. I was like, any little change could offset so much more than what people actually consider. Like, yeah, you're not going to go back in time and kill some prominent figure. Someone goes back and kills Hitler before World War II, so the whole thing changes. Well, sure, it sounds like something that someone would want to do, but would you be going back in time? If you change that impact, we wouldn't be going in time, because if they went back to do, you know what I'm saying? Like, everything would be impacted. So that's where my brain starts to, like, I wouldn't say hurt, but I'm like trying to think about this. If we had the ability to go back in time, someone created it. If we changed things back then, would they still be able to create it later in the future to where they even went back, so they didn't end up going back because it didn't exist? It's weird to think that.
Yeah, what would they be going back to? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was what was the? It was Stephen King's story, and they did a movie, or maybe it was a miniseries on this with James Franco, where he went back and basically stopped the Kennedy assassination. And
The Man in the High Tower.
No, it wasn't that. Because that was with that had more to do with the Nazis, right? No, it was actually what was it, 1963? Is that the name of it? In any case,
Maybe.
um, yeah, it's kind of and basically it has a similar concept to Man in the High Tower, right? Because okay, Kennedy um was was not assassinated, and so when he got back to modern times, everything was completely different. It was actually I was surprised that Stephen King went down this route. Maybe he wasn't a maybe he didn't like Kennedy or something, because he basically came back to like this war zone. And so he had to go back again and reset it all. But yeah, so what are the repercussions of that? Is a lot of people mention the whole Hitler thing. There have been many different Hitlers throughout history, but we always go to Hitler. Um, but what if he is the result of meddling, of something that changed, and he was the result of it, of something else that was changed? Well, why does it have to be, that? And I hope this doesn't ding you that we're talking about this. It doesn't ding your YouTube channel uh, just by mentioning his name. But
I it shouldn't.
yeah, I hope not. But in any case, it's why is it always that? Well, why wouldn't we go back and change that? Well, maybe we did try to change it, and he is the result of our trying to change whatever happened.
I think that I don't see anyone, if they're that far advanced to where they know how to travel through time. I think they'd be smart enough to realize they wouldn't want to do something that drastic.
Well,
That's
there's also, there are certain things throughout history that had to have happened to get to where we are now.
mm-hmm.
So, and as terrible as all of that was, um, it did end up bringing those scientists like Werner von Braun here to the United States to jumpstart our rocket program and get us into space. And not just space, but all the technology that has come with putting us in space. There's so many household items that we have now that we don't think about that are a result of that program.
I know there has been sightings and obviously contacts and stuff throughout history, but I feel like a lot more UFO activity happened right after World War II. I know you had the Foo Fighters during the war. I've always wondered, and again, this is the tinfoil hat I'm wearing. I wonder if a lot of the stuff, it does relate with time travel. I wonder if a lot of these supposed UFOs or whatever they call them these days, UAPs, aren't actually beings from a different time coming back and observing what we did.
Yeah, and you have people that speculate that, and I don't dismiss it. I say it's one of the possibilities. There are people out there that are adamantly saying that UFOs, UAPs, these are just ourselves. These are people from the future that are coming back in time, and they have just like thrown everything at it. This explains it all. And that always bugs me when people try to make a one and done explanation for a type of phenomenon. I think UFOs and UAPs are a variety of different things. Do I think some of them are physical beings coming from another place in the universe? Sure. How they got here? Well, we can debate on that one, because they could be using a variety of different methods, and now you have a whole other rabbit hole to go down. I think some of these are interdimensional in nature. Are some of them time travelers? Yes. I believe some of them may actually be time travelers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're human. So when people are like, well, they're just us. Well, maybe we don't exactly know what happens in the future. Our planet is 4.5 billion years old and has about 5 billion years left before the sun swallows it up when it becomes a red giant. So we're uniquely positioned, almost right in the middle of our planet's history. But you got to think about how much of an age that is. Oldest human Homo sapien, I should say Homo sapien skeletons that have been found to date go back about 315,000 years, which really is not very long ago at all. The dinosaurs went extinct 64 million years ago. That's just over 1% of the entire lifetime of the Earth. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it tells us like that's ancient. That's prehistory. That's a long, long time ago. So if you just go a little more than another 1% of our planet's history, another 64 million years, will human beings even still be around at that point? Not too many life forms last that long on this planet if you look at our planet's history. So it might not be us that's coming back in time. We may have already left this planet for a variety of different reasons. We may have annihilated ourselves. We may have, the planet could have become in such a state that we needed to go colonize somewhere else, whatever. So millions of years from now, it could be some other intelligent life form that has evolved here on Earth, developed a civilization, developed time travel technology, and have come back to check out the history of the Earth. So it could be, yes, they could be indigenous here to planet Earth, but might not be human. Or if we go the extraterrestrial route, they don't have to be, physical UFOs from our time. They could be, again, millions of years from now. Say spacefaring race encounters our planet. They're looking for a new home, or maybe they're looking to colonize other planets, deem our planet habitable. They land here, they develop technology, maybe time travel technology, come back here in time to check out the history of the planet. So they could still be extraterrestrials, but yet are living here on Earth in a future time. So there's a lot of different ways we can look at this. It's not always just this one, oh yes, it's us from the future. Well, yeah, could be from the future, but you have a lot of other options with a future civilization too.
I've often wondered if Earth's 4 billion years old and we could predate life for the dinosaurs. What was it, like 300 and something million years ago? Mm-hmm. What was going on before dinosaurs? I know they had mass extinctions. Again, they've proven that. But like, if you think about time in the sense of millions of years, and we've got billions of years, what was going on 2 billion years ago? Could there have been a civilization that left Earth because of some big disasters that wiped out all life? So they've left and traveled out through space, and now they're just coming back to investigate what's going on now.
And there's always that possibility. And when we start getting into lost civilizations, people don't want to hear that. They have a very nice order of the way things were supposed to have happened and evolved. And once you start talking about, lost civilizations rising or falling, or being at a point in our ancient past where it's not supposed to be, they really don't want to talk about it. And they certainly don't want to talk about the possibility that, we may have come here from somewhere else in the cosmos. There's a lot of people that believe that we may have originated on Mars, or at least that there was a civilization on Mars, and they could have had some sort of relationship with Earth. We know that Mars had more of an atmosphere there than it does now. Could have very well have sustained life, especially in the earlier version of the solar system. So yeah, the traditional science really doesn't want to go down this route, because I think it opens up too much of a can of worms.
It opens up too many questions that they don't really have an answer for. They don't want to.
Right.
They don't like leaving things without answers or open-ended, I guess.
Very true. Very true. That, and if they start to sound a little I guess, too wonky, for lack of a better term, they might lose their funding. So there's a certain line that they have to toe.
I think that's part of the reason, not to go back to the same thing earlier, but the whole red grid mark thing. A lot of the belief is that these are from, and the guy I recently talked to, they're not calling them ETs or anything like that. They're saying non-human intelligence.
Right.
So
non-human intelligence or biologics is another new one they've thrown out there.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what most people think these things are for the red grid mark, is there's some sort of intelligent beings that aren't human doing this. So that's why mainstream doesn't want to have anything to do with it, because they don't want to be associated with this weird phenomena. If it's somehow gets back to funding of, oh, you're looking into alien stuff, you're not getting any money.
Right. Yeah, you can't call it alien, can't call it extraterrestrial, you can't call it UFO. We have to come up with all these different terms so it doesn't sound as crackpot, I suppose.
Well, Mike, I think we can probably wrap this up, but before we do, I would like for you to let everyone know where they can find your books at and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can go to my website, MikeRicksecker.com. All my books are listed there with links to different places you can purchase them: Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can get those books in your brick and mortar store. If they don't have it there, then you can, of course, have them order that. I'm all kinds of social media, so YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of that stuff. I also have connecteduniverseportal.com, which is an online learning platform where we dive into a lot of these different esoteric topics. And then I have my podcast, Connecting the Universe.
And all those will be included in the show notes for anyone interested. So it'll be easy for you to find. But again, I want to say thanks for coming out here and talking with me tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Brandon. This has been a fantastic conversation.
I don't usually say a whole lot with the way my podcast is set up. I usually just interview people and let them talk about their experiences or whatever, but it's nice to have conversations back and forth about some topics. And I've started looking into different things here and there. It's not so much with people that are experiencing things, but I'm trying to bring a light to different topics as well. So I think this is a good start to dive down some different rabbit holes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. We need to get the conversations about these different phenomena, these different experiences rolling. That's how we learn.
Yep, totally agree. Well, again, Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.